Hey everybody, welcome back to Nerd News Today. I'm Matthew, and today we're taking a look at a new Legends in 3D bust coming to us from Diamond Select, and this is a character who I've always had a soft spot for, and that is Daredevil. Known as Matt Murdock to his friends and the man without fear to his enemies, Daredevil has been one of the founding members of Marvel for the longest time, and he's still one of my personal favorites. And I've said in the past here how there is a pretty decent amount of Daredevil stuff, but a lot of it really hasn't connected with me, and I've been very happy lately seeing some of the stuff that Diamond's been doing. Typically on this channel, I take a look mostly at PVC diorama statues, which are much more affordable. They tend to be in the $60 to $75 range these days, or more if it's a larger statue. But for today's video, we're kicking things up a notch, and we're taking a look at this Legends in 3D bust right here. And this guy is a resin piece, which means not only is it going to be higher quality, it's also a lot heavier, and the price has gone up along with it. Before we start taking a look at the bust itself, I just want to run down a few stats about this, as well as show you guys the packaging here. And yes, this is a resin half-scale bust, as I've already mentioned, but it's also a limited edition piece. Generally speaking, all of the Legends in 3D pieces are limited, and this Man Without Fear is limited to only 1,000 pieces total. In other words, once he's gone, he's gone. So after this video, if you like him, definitely grab them while you can. Now let's talk about this box here real quick. And like all the Diamond Select resin pieces, there's not really much to look at here, and what there is pretty simple and quick to see. The overall packaging color scheme is black, and that's just what they do with all their resin pieces, no matter if it's Star Wars or Marvel or anything else. But we do have a great big image of how this half-scale bust is going to look from the front. And that's a full color image as well, along with a sort of golden font here letting you know that it's Daredevil and that it's a half-scale resin bust. Now the sides of the packaging are even less interesting, but they do have the really nice Legends in 3D logo, as well as a repeat of his name. And it's all done with this really great looking golden font that's quite reflective, really pretty to look at. And unfortunately, the back of the box is where things kind of fall apart for this packaging. And this has been a pet peeve of mine in several videos in the past, looking at resin pieces from Diamond Select, but it's so dark and practically unreadable. You guys can see it here. I've done my best to kind of help a little bit with some of the post effects, but it's still just dark with equally dark letters. So it's unfortunate because there actually is a pretty lengthy bio here about Matt Murdock, and more so just the origin story of who Daredevil is, but good luck trying to read it. The back of the box also features a reminder that this is a limited edition and that they're all numbered. You can see my number right here, but most importantly, it tells us who is responsible for this piece, and this Daredevil bust was designed by Joe Allard and sculpted by Rocco Tartamella. So we've seen the box, let's go ahead now and take a look at our statue outside of the packaging and get a better look at Old Hornhead outside of the box. And here is our Legends in 3D half-scale Daredevil bust out of the packaging. This guy is impressive looking. You know, the images on the box really don't do it justice at all. So let me give you guys a quick rotation while I talk about my initial thoughts with this piece here. And yeah, seeing him now outside of the box, it's honestly a lot better looking. I mean, again, we're gonna go back to how dark that box looked, and a lot of the details there just looked kind of odd, but seeing in a person, they make a lot more visual sense to me. There's a lot of elements that kind of got left out, including that base, which is gorgeous. And there's just a lot more depth to the piece than I was expecting, and none of that really translated well in the box. So here out of the packaging, and you would always hope it to be that way, but here out of the packaging, this is just a way stronger piece, and I'm now suddenly a lot more interested in this guy here. So we're going to start this review now and begin with the place I always like to start, and that's by looking at the face and the likeness and asking about whether or not this looks like Daredevil, and in the case of this statue, which version of Daredevil is this supposed to be? And that kind of is a tough question at first, because especially when I saw it in the box, I couldn't really get a read on it, but seeing it now loose and in person, you know, my initial thought was it kind of looks like the way that Glenn Fabry, I believe, would have done his illustrations, or more actually, I think it's more accurately, his paintings of Daredevil. It kind of reminds me of the Glenn Fabry look, but then as I saw it and I really noticed the way the brow is and the shape of the nose and the mouth, it actually kind of has some influences from Frank Miller and Klaus Jansson's very historic run on Daredevil, because they really love this sort of like brow look here, and you can see that in a lot of Frank Miller's work, especially if you go into like The Dark Knight Returns, for example. You will see that. Not everybody draws the brow like this. I mean, if you look at how it is in current comics, for example, I couldn't tell he was drawing it at this moment, but even in the last few years, Daredevil doesn't have this kind of brow. This is totally a Miller and Janson signature thing. So that kind of gives it away to me. And likewise too, the nose and the mouth are very much that style, but I will say this. The way a lot of people draw Daredevil is like a fairly generic looking guy. They don't really do a lot to make him stand out, and I will say that as well about this piece here. This is just literally a square-jawed white dude with fairly uninteresting features. I mean, but it does look like Daredevil because this is how he is drawn. He doesn't exactly have like the sharpest looking features out there. He just kind of blends in if you really think about it. So mission accomplished with that, but all the details are done really well. Don't get me wrong. The execution is awesomely done here. I'm actually just giving it a poke now to test some stuff here because I'm looking at some of the stuff that's on his mouth and I'm debating whether or not that is texture that's meant to be there or if that's just paint slop. Because I will say, the one thing I can kind of tell about the statue is it looks like the mouthpiece especially was first cast in a darker part of resin or painted in a darker shade of resin, and then the skin tone, the lighter skin tone, is painted on top of it. And that's kind of like similar to how they would have done Batman the animated series in the 90s, where they like do their backgrounds first with like all black and then they would do the highlights in the other colors. That kind of feels like that's what they did here. And if that's the case, it works really well because you have this dark underpainting that adds a lot of depth to the skin tone that you're seeing in this piece here. I don't know for sure how they did this, but that's just my 2 cents on it. And the way that the light is really casting on it too, like that kind of feels like it confirms my theory, but again, without talking to the manufacturers directly, I'm gonna have no idea. But that said, there is some texture on it and it appears like it is intentional. Yeah, it's a little hard to say, but it does look, okay, actually, as I look at the nose, I do see more of the pore detail in there, so I think that actually is intentional. Like, I can see some design in the lips as well, some creases in the lips, but especially on the nose, the nostrils, the chin, the jaw area, there is a little bit more of a texture to it that is certainly helping it look a lot more realistic. And there's also a texture across the entire statue. I mean, you guys can definitely see that I think a little bit more clearly, but there's like a rough texture to the head and to the rest of the body here, and that really helps this to not just look like a piece of flat red spandex. That's something I was worried about. I was actually very concerned about that statue looking like that. So the fact that there actually is a great deal of texture on it, along with that furrowed brow, I mean, that just goes miles in helping this look more realistic and being a much more eye-catching sort of statue. I do want to talk about these horns for a second. They thankfully have rounded off corners for the most part, so they're not super sharp like you'd expect them to be, but they're still pretty decently sharp. So that's just a thing to point out, because normally Diamond loves having very nice sharp parts on all their statues, or as I call them, the Diamond Death Trap, but none of that here today. Check out these cheekbones, by the way. Daredevil does have really nice cheekbones, at least he does in the comics. Unlike Ben Affleck, his cheekbones, maybe not so much, but Daredevil's looking good. I like how his ears are covered. And just check out some of the fabric detail as well in this piece and just how that's looking with his ears essentially pulling on the fabric to create these creases. It looks very realistic, very lifelike here, and that's stuff that just doesn't translate when you're looking at the box. So let's kind of now start taking a look at the body as well. Let's spend some time in depth on that. So as I already mentioned, a lot of the same stuff here. We're seeing just great creases in this piece here. It's a very skin-tight outfit, and it's really being pulled across him. You can tell just by all the stuff that's being yanked across there. The Daredevil logo is kind of interesting, because it's like basically like a plate on his chest kind of cut out. It's very much a raised logo. It's a 3-dimensional logo. So it's not like it's just painted onto his body. This is a sculpted detail. I don't know how I feel about that. I think it looks cool, artistically speaking. As a statue, I think it looks great. If you're trying to get something that's more realistic, I don't know if it works, because he really isn't walking around with this giant thing on his chest, but you know, I think it worked for the sake of the statue, and it does add some good contrast to the piece, because there is a lot of rough texture in this, as we're going to see as we continue along here. So having something a little bit smoother is a real good boon to making this piece just be more exciting. And I also just want to show you guys his traps. Check out his traps. I mean, the man does not miss working on his neck and back either. I mean, look at these back muscles. That is a muscular, agile-looking guy here. And that's what I like about the piece, is that this isn't a roided-up Daredevil. This feels like it's a very lean, agile character, and that comes across in the musculature. Now, let's talk about the base here, because that base is pretty darn amazing. So I was talking about the sort of rough texture earlier, and this base is basically a cathedral tower of some kind. Generally, you will see a similar motif across all Daredevil pieces. I mean, heck, even the last one we looked at, which was like a 1/6 or 1/7 scale Daredevil resin statue that had like more of his body, that had a similar thing. We had like a church background. Here, once again, we have that. And they both look really great. Like, those are always some of my favorite things to look at, because there's so much more detail in them. And yeah, you know, the same goes for this piece as well. We've got these awesome looking weeping angels. We have some very nice, looks like a decal. Yeah, it's gotta be a decal application of the stained glass windows. Really, really pretty to look at those. And just great repeating patterns, all these sharp bits here, all these things that kind of lead you back up to the top of the statue here. It's basically the same thing across all 4 sides of how this piece looks, but it's wonderfully done, and it's really, really eye-catching. You'll never hear me complain about a base on any Daredevil pieces ever, because they always look great. They always have that sort of gothic architecture, whether it's the architecture of New York City or of classic cathedrals. And quite honestly, they always look good no matter how they do it. Now, speaking of the base, I want to show you guys something important on that, and that would be on the very bottom. That is our Daredevil statues limited edition number. All the statues have numbers in their boxes, but you can also find that same information on the bottom of their bases. And in addition to that, our Daredevil piece also comes with this card right here, which once again has that same info. So you got a few different ways to make sure you don't lose what number your statue is. So overall, this is a really great piece. It's actually a surprisingly good piece, because like I said before, that box did nothing to help it out at all, really. Like, the more I look at it, in fact, off camera, I'm just like seeing, like, yeah, all those details that I talked about and that I loved so much did not show up on the box, or they're definitely not that noticeable. This is definitely a statue where you got to get it in your hands to truly appreciate the artistry and the craftsmanship that went into this, as well as just, frankly, how darn nice the whole thing is. I mean, as a collectible, yeah, it's great, but as a piece of sort of photorealistic art too, it's really, really great. And I like the base very, very much, of course. The texture is on point. The reference to what I assume is meant to be the Miller Jansen Daredevil, that looks wonderful here too. So this is really a piece that's targeted for those classic comic book fans out there that want an iconic Daredevil piece. And yeah, you're not going to be disappointed with this one here at all. I think it's definitely worth picking up for your collection. And speaking of, if you do want to get this for your collection, go ahead and check out some of my affiliate links in the description of this video below. There you're going to find a few different places where you can pick this up, and if you do that, clicking on any of those links, it helps support this YouTube channel at no extra cost to you. And we'd be ever so grateful if you did do that. So, until then, we'll go ahead and give it one more rotation to this guy. But yeah, this Daredevil piece, total knockout. I'm very, very happy with this one. I think you're going to be happy about this one too. So, until next time, I'm Matthew. This has been Nerd News Today. Thanks for watching. Stick around because we got plenty more statue reviews, figure unboxings, and a whole lot of other surprises, and plenty more here over on Nerd News Today. We'll see you guys next time.